Alright guys, welcome back to the next episode of our driver career mode here in F123. We had a pretty okay weekend in the last race in Japan. P10 finished with 1 point after a pretty decent race. Our pace wasn't quite there, but in the previous races, in the previous games, we've always had trouble in those S's there in Sector 1. But coming off of a decent weekend and coming into Qatar, so it's our last sprint of the season, I don't believe any of the other tracks will have a sprint race. Qatar, USA, Mexico, Brazil, Vegas, and Abu Dhabi. But we're the last legs of the season, and we're sitting in P9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we're sitting in P9 for our driver standings, and then P6 for constructor standings. So pretty decent gap between us and McLaren. I don't think there's going to be that much of an improvement to try to get up into P5 for the constructor standings, but we are in good standing with Williams as of right now with 73 points, and Logan Sargent, our teammate Logan Sargent, still yet to score any points, and then that's the same situation for Nick DeVries, and he's more than likely going to be swapped out at the end of the season for Daniel Ricciardo or somebody else. We'll have to wait and see, as we're quite a bit ahead of points of Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, and then Carlos Sainz is 132 points up in P8. So as long as we can keep scoring points and doing better than Lance Stroll, Oscar Piastri, we may be sitting here in P9 for the rest of the season. So sprint weekend, we have to be very scarce about our tires. This last weekend, they actually did race in Qatar, with Max Verstappen winning his third world championship, and Oscar Piastri winning his first race, being that of the sprint race. And then pretty much McLaren 1-2 on the podium, and Max Verstappen. So same people on the podiums for sprint and the main race this previous weekend of me recording this when they were in Qatar. So congratulations to Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri on that real-life win, as we're going to go ahead and go through practice and see you guys for qualifying. Alright, so we're only about 5/10 off of a gain. 5/10 gain off of that last set of soft tires we used from Q1. And as of right now, we're splitting the Aston Martins of Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. We're going to be starting on road number 6 with Fernando Alonso for the sprint. Lando Norris gets the provisional P1 up to the shootout here in Q2. And Sergio Perez is not doing so well. Max Verstappen split between the Mercedes and George Russell on the front row. But yeah, they still have one more qualifying session to go. Let's get on the road for the sprint race.
Welcome to today's sprint. This is shaping up to be another fantastic weekend. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting sprint. Max Verstappen put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position, edging out Lando Norris, who'll start from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Russell, Hamilton, Perez, Leclerc, Gasly, Sainz, Oscar Piastri, Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Johnson, Stroll, Bottas, Joe, Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Sargent, and Nick de Vries. And with preparations almost complete, let's head trackside for today's sprint. And I'm joined once again by Anthony Davidson to bring you the lowdown for today's race. They've been involved in a number of costly incidents lately. That's got to affect their mindset going into this race.
Certainly confidence is an important factor. And every time you're involved in an incident, it's not just the car you damage, but that confidence as well. But all the top racing drivers are able to tune that out when the race gets underway and focus on the job at hand.
All right, so here we are for Qatar sprint race, and they're wanting us to run on the softs, and I don't know if I want to trust these soft tires. I don't know what kind of tires we have left for the race, but it did say that we have a medium and a hard tire compound for the race, and I'm just hoping that the tire degradation isn't that bad in the main race where we have to use a third set of tires. But we're just going to go ahead and leave it as is and get right to this race. Alright, so here we are for the sprint race. 7-lap sprint race, even though the 7 laps we're going to be running on a set of soft tires. We did use that extra set of one set of soft tires during qualifying, so we get a set of soft tires for the main race after the sprint.
Okay, incredible parking there, nice one. That's going to give you the edge if you can get good launch as the race starts.
And as I said before, we're going to be splitting between Alonso and Stroll of the Aston Martins as our 5 red lights are off. We got out to an okay launch. We put some extra rubber through the tires off the start as they're almost 4 wide right in front of us. Sainz, Hamilton, Piastri, Stroll, Ocon, all those guys. Were a little bit of contact from Stroll coming through turn 1. You can see Ocon on the right side, just barely, as we're basically taking it easy here. Through these first few corners, getting into the groove on the set of soft tires, as I believe everybody was on the softs, but I could have been wrong. I don't quite remember, because we're slotting up into P11, so only 2 positions off of the start, 3 positions off the start. A little bit of wheel spin there, as we're looking for an opening on Carlos Sainz. We go wide there through sector 2. This view is actually really nice. I liked it. It's a kind of a downhill perspective, but it's just showing you how the elevation works within the track. As you can see, the 2 Alfa Romeos ahead of us, or behind us, as we come back into focus, and we're about a second back behind Oscar Piastri up in P9. And the other rookie doing a little bit better than us right now, as we're rounding out towards the end of lap 1. This last hairpin to the right, as Carlos Sainz is close behind, and is going to carry that momentum out of that last corner to try and make a move. You can see Stroll trying to make a move on Venturi Paddock there in the back, as Joe makes a move on Bottas. We're coming through turn 1, defending against Carlos Sainz, still sitting on P10 there, as coming through this 3rd corner. I believe it was the 3rd corner. A little bit better than the first lap. So lap 2, and we're still holding strong against Carlos Sainz, and we're just under a second behind Oscar Piastri. You can see the zones here. You can take a lot of our car out of track limits, and the hairpin, we're going a little bit wide as we're trying to get closer to Piastri. We're now 3/10 back behind him, as we're coming through the end of Sector 1, the start of Sector 2, I believe that's where it is. I'm not too familiar with the track as of yet, as we are going to be moving on. And lap 4 is when we're finally able to see some more action. We're actually farther back behind Piastri, as Carlos Sainz is coming back to make another attempt onto the main straight. Zhou and Bottas are still neck and neck. You can see the momentum with DRS from the Ferrari. As we're pretty much finding our match. We're starting to feel the wear and tear on these soft tires here in Qatar. As Esteban Ocon, a little bit of contact there. We spin, and a little bit of more spinning coming from our car as we're trying to get back on track. And Esteban Ocon now in the offensive as we're trying to defend against him back in P11. We're coming through, I believe, the start of Sector 2. And there's a little tad bit of wheel spin here as our back end comes up into the air. And we end up coming in contact with, I believe, Zhou or Magnussen. I don't remember. Believe it was Magnussen. But yeah, we're going to be coming back over to the perspective of Esteban Ocon coming through this corner. So you can see we're on the outside. We hold the outside line. He has the momentum coming through. And we run a little bit wide here. And on the second turn, we're staying in bounds. And I don't know if it was my fault or not, but he ends up sideswiping us. And yeah, here's going to be that third person perspective again as we're running on the outside. A little bit of wheel spin. Ocon loses his front wing, and then we blast, pulverize the 15-meter marker as we get a 3-second track limit warning for that incident right there, as Sargent ended up slamming into the back of Hulkenberg, and Ocon goes into the pits. So we're going to be bumping up to P15 behind Lance Stroll. So that's going to be pretty much it for our sprint race, as Sector 2 incident really put a stop to our weekend as of yet.
And after this round of the World Championship, here's how things look in the drivers' table. The gap at the top of the championship has been cut down after a difficult race today for our championship leader. With the sprint wrapped up, we now have our grid line up for the big race tomorrow. Be sure to join us then for what will no doubt be a fantastic race.
All right, so not very, not what we planned on doing. Esteban Ocon really biting us in the ass there, if it was our fault or not. But that incident is going to be pushing us back to P15 instead of in the top 10 for a start. As Fernando Alonso gets driver of the day for the sprint race, moving up to P5 from P11 with those pit stops that we had, those late pit stops that we had. We managed to make a few positions as Yuki Tsunoda, Esteban Ocon, Venturi Paddock, Nico Hulkenberg, and then Logan Sargent in the mix getting caught up with that. But that was not an ideal sprint race to round out the end of our sprint races for the season. As with how that went, we have a long main race to go here in Qatar. So let's get to the main race.
Welcome back to Qatar and the Lusail International Circuit. There's a long history of two-wheeled motorsport action here, but in 2021, Lewis Hamilton won out as part of an epic battle that year with Max Verstappen. But who will win out tonight? We're back here in Lusail for a track that's 3.34 miles long. There are 16 turns around its unique three-pronged shape and just a single DRS zone out of turn 16. It's fast and it's flowing, and there's a good overtaking opportunity with DRS down the long straight and into turn 1. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. World champion Max Verstappen starts from pole position, and starting next to them is George Russell. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Norris, Perez, Fernando Alonso, Leclerc, Hamilton, Gasly, Oscar Piastri, Sainz, Magnussen, Stroll, Zhou, De Vries, Johnson, Sonoda, Bottas, Hulkenberg, Sargent, and Esteban Ocon lines up at the back of the grid. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. Joining me for the Grand Prix once again is none other than Anthony Davidson. The last few races have been a bit rough for them, unable to get a clean run. That's got to have some effect on their confidence, surely.
It's not an ideal situation by any means. When you get into a bad run like that, there's always a risk of frustration creeping in, which can cause more mistakes and locks you into this vicious cycle. Hopefully today they can get through turn 1 cleanly and stay calm for the rest of the race.
All right, so round 2 here in Qatar for the full race is going to be a 20-lap race. And not really looking forward to it, because we're going to be starting next to the AlphaTauri. And really, I'm going to go ahead and see what we can do with the strategy and then head right to the track. Right now, we're once again in P15 as a couple other positions got changed. We're now between De Vries and Sonoda. This time we're going to be starting on the mediums and then...
Superb parking there, mate. Let's make sure we get the edge on the surrounding drivers as the lights go out.
Yeah, so we're going to be starting on the mediums and then going to softs this time, as a lot of other drivers are on the soft tires to start out. Our 5 red lights are off. We're off to a good start. We didn't burn the rubber on these tires as much as we did during the sprint for the soft tires. But yeah, so cars 3 wide, 2 wide. We're coming 3 wide with the AlphaTauri and the Aston Martin Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll is on the inside this time compared to the sprint race, as we take a lot more precaution into this first few corners compared to the sprint race. We have a longer race to take care of this time around as we slot into the toe of Lance Stroll. And we try to make a move on the outside as De Vries is right there. Try to jockey for position with us as the grid is still somewhat 2x2 coming through these corners through Sector 1 and now Sector 2. And we're basically trying to look for a move on the outside, break late against Lance Stroll. Pierre Gasly ahead of us in P12, trying to wait for Magnussen to slip up as we give that position back to Lance Stroll. And Sonoda's close behind, but we're still trying to get grips on our braking points here, especially through Sector 2, the end of Sector 1, start of Sector 2. This is where we had the incident with Lance Stroll in the sprint race, I believe is right here. We're coming through Sector 2. Sonoda catching up to us as we're losing a little bit of ground on Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll getting close to Pierre Gasly to try to make a move. So we're coming back onto the main straight. We have some good momentum off of this first lap. You can just see the pace of Stroll on Gasly as he's able to... The toe definitely affects him a lot better than it does for me. As we're lap 2 now, and we're basically having to wait to see what we can do. As Stroll is now up into P12, ahead of Pierre Gasly. Yeah, we've been fighting pretty much all season. The 2 drivers we've been pretty much fighting all season. Lap 3 now, the end of lap 3, start of lap 4. We're finally able to get DRS and make a move on Pierre Gasly as he is on the hard tires. There's only a select few. I believe him and 2 others were on hard tires. And then there was like 4 of us on mediums and everybody else on softs in the top 10 as we make an okay pass over to P13. Kevin Magnussen next up in P12, Lance Stroll in P11. Lance Stroll made it up to P10 as Gasly is going to be close behind us, about half a second. We're trying to make a move on Magnussen on lap 8 now. Let's see Zhou Guanyu ahead of us there as we're trying to look for an opening. And we have the momentum out of that corner through Sector 1, now Sector 2. And we managed to move to the inside through this set of S's before we get to Sector 3. And feeling a lot better now. So we're in the groove. We're feeling pretty good about these medium tires. They're 8-lap-old medium tires. And felt a little bit of wheel spin on these guys. As next up is Guan Yu Zhou up in P11. He's about a second behind Stroll, and we're about just under a second behind him. So rounding out the end of lap 8, we're behind Zhou Guan Yu. But I believe people start coming into the pits this lap, and if I am correct, it is Max Verstappen at this point, the first person to come into pits off of his set of soft tires. So Max Verstappen into the pits early. Sergio Perez loses out P1 on Russell on lap 9. And the next lap around, we're getting closer to Guan Yu Zhou, as you can see Hamilton, Perez are now coming into the pits. And Zhou Guan Yu ahead of us and Magnussen behind us come into the pits as well. We're going to be bumping up to, I believe, P6 behind Piastri and Alonso. And I'm wrong. Stroll stayed out, and it was Alonso coming into the pits. Hard to remember at this time. But you can see Pierre Gasly still about over a second gap between us and Gasly. And then the same with Lance Stroll, lap 10 now. And we got to catch up to Lance Stroll, and that's not really going to matter because at the end of this lap, we do manage to catch up to Stroll a little bit, but it's time for us to come into the pits. So he's going to be swapping off of his soft tires. We're going to be swapping off of our mediums to soft tires. So we're going to have an advantage on the second half of this race of being on the soft tires, and Stroll is going to be on those mediums because every driver pretty much used their other set of softs during the sprint race, and you have to use 2 different sets of tire compounds as Piastri is coming out of the pits ahead of us. And we still managed to come out behind the Aston Martin and Lance Stroll, but this time we're a lot closer, and the pit speed manages to help us out here as we're coming out onto the track back in P12, almost where we started. As Zhou Guan Yu makes his way through. An undercut, not really effective undercut on his part, but now we're in a fight for position against Lance Stroll as we're over the halfway point. As we're coming back onto the track and getting used to the soft tires again, as we haven't driven since the previous day, so the weather may be a little bit different. As we're trying to stick to the racing line as best as possible, using the curb as much as we can without getting any warnings. As we're basically finding the same momentum that we did on Magnussen earlier as we try to make a move on the outside on these S's, but we're waiting for our chance to strike. We're coming through Sector 2. Lance Stroll, 0.25. We managed to get momentum out of the left-hander side by side through the sector that we had issues with on the sprint race. Long right-hander, long right double-hander. We have contact from Stroll. He's going to spin us out. Pretty much the same exact area that we had to deal with Ocon from the previous day. So he's going to be the perspective of Lance Stroll. We're moving on the inside on those soft tires. We have the advantage. We have the pace. We're on the outside. Coming back on track. And Lance Stroll makes a dive bomb to the inside corner and basically sideswiping us, ruining our weekend here. As we basically lightning struck twice on us this weekend here in Qatar, is what we're going to be saying. Is we get sideswiped in pretty much the same exact area by 2 different drivers, and luckily that we didn't get a DNF here. Luckily we had minimal damage. We didn't lose our front wing on either of the incidents. Minimal damage, as we're now slotted behind Logan Sargent, our teammate, as we have to jockey for position up into P16. And I believe there was also another incident after this where I believe Magnussen had to go into the pits. We tried to make a move on him as we passed Logan Sargent. We're up into P16. I believe there was one other minimal incident where we had been able to get up into P15 to finish out our race. There's the move on Sonoda, P15, and then we ended up finishing the race in P14. I believe Magnussen had some contact, or Bottas, I'm not quite sure. That's going to round out our weekend here in Qatar. A double lightning strike, so to speak, to finish us out with no points this weekend.
And that's the end of the race. We'll see you in Parc Fermé.
That's it for another Grand Prix and a fantastic win for Mercedes. Tell me, Ant, how do you think they were able to deliver such an incredible result today?
I think a large part of the result comes down to temperament. They were able to keep their heads when everyone around them was losing theirs, and that's allowed them to get the best out of the car, to maximise the strategy, and to stay out of trouble.
So after a magnificent race, we can now see the drivers making their way to the podium. Once again, it's the Silver Arrows who take the top spot, a well-earned victory for Mercedes. Let's see how the driver's standings have changed. That's a positive result for George Russell, who further solidifies his position at the top of the standings. Let's focus on the driver of the day, Anthony Davidson. Who do you pick?
There's a few contenders, but George Russell definitely stood out, I think. A really solid drive from him today, and one I'm sure the fans enjoyed.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes continue to extend their lead. I'm equal parts exhausted and elated with this weekend of Formula One, so be sure to join us for the next one.
All right, so rinse and repeat incident for us in the main race as we try to get back on the racing line, and here comes Lance Stroll. Only a yellow flag in that sector, no full safety car, which doesn't really help us out. But those hard tires, they had us go early on the first set of tires on the medium, so they had us go medium, so we went ahead and went on lap 10, and then after we swapped over the softs is when we had the incident with Lance Stroll. So not very happy with Lance Stroll, not very happy with Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon making the best out of his weekend with the main race going up from last place to P12 as our teammate Logan Sargent finishing only 2 positions behind us. He made some progress as well as Nick DeVries is out P20, Lance Stroll P19. After that incident, you saw I believe it was Nico Hulkenberg went into the pit. But yes, a weekend to not remember here in Qatar, and we'll have to wait and see if we can improve compared to this in next season. So that's going to be it for our Qatar Grand Prix, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.